is another one of my philosophical lecture shorts, and today we're going to be talking about Emmanuel Levinas. Now, usually if you see everything's up on the board, I had a malfunction with my camera. I like to write it as we talk, but leave it up here because I have to redo the video. So that's why everything's up when normally it's not, okay? So Emmanuel Levinas, he is a French philosopher in the 20th century, and some call him the secret king of continental philosophy. Because a lot of people didn't really start to know who he was in the rest of the world, or Western world, until the 80s and 90s, and he'd been writing for a long time. He's also the one that brought Husserl to Sartre's attention. So he is famous in his own right. He is a great philosopher. And his two main books, Totality and Infinity, and his other one, The Otherwise in Being or Beyond Essence. Now, Emmanuel Levinas, his philosophy is definitely indebted to the phenomenology of both Edmund Husserl and Martin Heidegger. He actually, in the late 1920s, got to attend a lecture series, which he was a part of, in which Husserl and Heidegger were putting on at the University of Freiburg. Now, what ended up happening is, Levinas says, I went there to see Husserl, to study Husserl, and yet I discovered Heidegger in return, okay? And basically, he criticizes Husserl of his phenomenology being too intellectual, okay, and too abstract. And he preferred Heidegger's idea of like being in the world, of more about lived experience in the here and now, and our actual lived experience, okay? And so he actually very indebted to Heidegger, despite it will be from a positive view, but also a negative view too. Just like Heidegger and Husserl, what Levinas is curious about, he wants to know the origin or our ontological foundation, the beginning point, okay, of our lived experience. What is it in our experience that makes us go, what is this? That makes us first ask that question. Or Heidegger's question, why is there something rather than nothing? What even makes that question show up to us? What is it that makes the world in which we are in show up to us as a world? That's what he wants to get at. What is that initial or original experience? Now, Heidegger showed us a lot about this, and for Levinas as well, too. But as we'll see, he thinks Heidegger is too focused on the other as the they. And if you haven't seen my lecture on Heidegger, I'll give a little recap. Heidegger believes we are this thing called Dasein, or what he calls human existence, okay? And basically he calls it a being in the world. We are a being which is always already thrown into a world which has already been taken care of. There is no human being isolated from the world. All human beings are in a situation, a factical situation. You can't just take the human being out of it. And so we therefore must interpret that factical situation with the being. Along with this, the world shows up, it's already taken care of because there are already other Dasein which are in this world, in which we can have concern for them in different ways of leaping in or leaping ahead, as he claims. But also because of that, there is this existential factor that is always already there, too, which Heidegger calls the they. And what Levinas thinks is the other gets too associated with the they. And the they is basically the kind of everydayness which takes me over, and I generally think of the world this way or that way, and don't really decide the world for myself. The others decide the world for me. And a lot of Heidegger's philosophy is how can I revolt or push away or dissolve myself from the they, which always is trying to take my own authenticity away from me, trying to cover me up of who I really am. And a lot of Heidegger's work deals with this. What Levinas wants to say is he's not disagreeing there's something called the they, but the other is something more fundamental than that. It's not simply the they. And Levinas wants to show us this. He actually thinks, where he begins rejecting Heidegger, is we all know Heidegger has had a flirtation with Nazism and has a big dilemma. And he says this is where he thinks philosophically, because he sees the other too much as the they, of why someone like Heidegger may be able to overlook these atrocities that were going on. And Levinas says one can forgive many Germans for what happened, but he finds it difficult to forgive Heidegger. Okay, and so he wants to show that the other, for Levinas, it's not just being in the world and all these things, the Mitdasein and being with and these other things that show up in the they. What allows them to show up, there's a more fundamental relation, which is just between me and the other. The other, our relationship to the other is what, as we'll see, Levinas thinks is the primal relationship. And so this is where he claims that ethics, is first philosophy. Now, what I want to first get clear, and we'll talk about the second when we talk about the ethical systems. If you're thinking of ethics as something like equality, or something like Kantian autonomy, or the categorical imperative, or utilitarianism in the greater good, or something like virtue ethics, then we're thinking this wrong. Because what Levinas seems to be talking about is a more primordial relationship between the other and I, okay, which is the foundation of those things. But when he says ethics is the ground of existence, he means there is this fundamental relation between me and the other, which is ethical. I mean, that's what ethics are about, remember, is my relationship between me and other people, the others. So he's talking this more fundamental one in which those things like autonomy and things can come from, but this is the basis of it. He claims ethics is the ground of existence. And what he wants us to do is we need to avoid what he calls totalizing the other. Typically, and this reminds us of Heidegger's how we can concern ourselves with them as objectively present things. Typically with the other, I see them as just, oh, that stranger in the crowd, or that stranger passing by, or that person who's trying to take my authenticity away from me, or just my friend, or someone as an acquaintance of mine, or someone who I'm working on a project with, or someone who just, like a student, who I just need to give them a passing grade so I get a good review. We generally just formalize or totalize who they are and say they're just like this or that, which we could also use the word objectify. What Levinas says, in order for us to come and encounter this fundamental relation, we need to avoid totalizing the other, and we need to keep our relationship with the other as incomprehensible. He thinks that initially there is something that is going on between me and the other when we encounter ourselves that is incomprehensible. It's not something that can be put into words. It's in a lived experience that is happening, in which these things we can eventually totalize, but where that totalization, the ground in which the totalization can happen, where why we can totalize it, there must be some other fundamental relation that comes first that is happening, and then we can formalize and abstract from that. But in order to be with it, we should leave it as incomprehensible. And he uses the word infinity. Now we see totality and infinity. Okay, he says this relationship is infinity, or the relationship with the infinite, with the other, of this thing which we cannot grasp yet we're a part of. He also uses the idea of God as well in this, and takes Descartes' idea of God as the infinite and compares it to it. Now, I don't think he's saying the other is God, but he's using it as a metaphor or a relationship, and like Descartes' relationship with the infinite and trying to achieve it, though we have knowledge of it, yet we can't put it into words. This is what's going on with the other. There's this infinite relationship I have of, there's an encounter that's going on, a lived experience, which I have knowledge of, yet it's not, in a sense, direct knowledge. I can't put it into words. I can't formulate it. Okay, and this is where we need to stay with it. And he says this encounter with the other, he thinks, always happens through language, through speech. We encounter the other because the other speaks to me. And it doesn't necessarily mean by talking. There is nonverbal communication too. There is a type of speech going on. I like to use the word discourse that happens between us, and this is where the other shows up to me. Okay? Now, what about ethical systems? Okay, such as Kantian ethics or utilitarianism, equality. What does he say about this? And we've kind of already hinted towards this idea anyway, but he basically says there's nothing wrong with asking about equality or about autonomy or about the greater good. Okay? But those are all things which come later. Those are derivative modes of a more fundamental foundation based in our lived experience. Our lived experience is the grounding or foundation in which things like equality could ever show up. They're important questions, but what Levinas is concerned with is not these derivative modes, but the most fundamental ethical relation. And not only that, the most fundamental relation of all lived experience, which happens to be, of course, to him, an ethical one between me and another. All right? And he says what shows up to us is not, in the first and foremost, that we're equal with the other, but what happens is it shows up that we actually are different. When I encounter the other, it's not that I go, oh, you are just like me. What strikes me and what makes me go, well, like this, what strikes me, okay, is that they're different, is that you aren't like me. You're something totally different, and here you are speaking to me and saying different things than I say and acting this way, and this difference, kind of what he calls, we use the French word alterity, okay? This difference makes me go, whoa, what's going on? I was living my world like this, and then I encounter this other, and they begin speaking to me, and I have to begin discoursing with them and changing the way I think now to relate to them, and they're relating to me, and this opens me up to, wait a minute, the world I was living before was like this, and now I have to change my thoughts because I am encountering these others which are questioning me, which are asking me things, okay? And this difference is what he thinks, because we are different, this is the thing that first makes me go, well, what's going on? Think back as the idea that no man is an island, okay? If we were isolated and didn't have others, we would just go on and the world would just be what it is, what it is, but we would never question it because there's no, I want to use this term, opposition, no difference, which first goes, wait a minute, that's different from that. What is this thing? There has to be this difference between us, okay, which is there, which first makes me go, there's something going on. And this is what takes me on to then asking, well, what does this mean? Who am I? Who are you? What's happening? What should I do? What's the meaning of all this? Why is there something rather than nothing? This difference in which the other is here puts to us. Okay, that is where it comes from. But I want to be careful. I don't think it's here, and this is maybe my opinion, but I don't think it's necessarily opposition in the abstract sense. This is always occurring in actual lived experience. We can say, well, you must be the opposition, the great opposition, what we're talking about. But when we just call it opposition purely as that, we lose the fact that that opposition comes from real, living, breathing, embodied people. And I'm an embodied person, this is going on. So we don't want to abstract too much, but we want to make sure we stay here in the now, what's really happening in actual existence. This difference is there. This is the ground. Now, when we encounter this other, and we see them through speech, he claims that the other asks us something. They're asking or requesting us something. And what they're requesting when I meet them, he says, is do not kill me. This is what he thinks happens in this primordial relationship we have with the other. He says what goes on is when I have to face the other, face to face, and I see them in their eyes, and I have to encounter this other, this incomprehensible relationship, he says, there's a request that comes out of it, and I see that they are requesting, do not kill me. Okay? And I can answer this request. Now, what I want to say, the best way I think to interpret this, or to help interpret this, is to use an example about maybe tribal experiences thousands of years ago. So say I was part of a tribe a few thousand years ago, and there's another tribe on the other side of the river, and we basically don't consider them human beings. We don't consider them anything like us. They consider them almost maybe monster-like and subhuman. And we've been taught, because of many wars between us, that those people we shall kill because they are dangerous. They are these horrible people. They are evil. All right? Now, one day I'm hunting out in the woods, and I'm on my own, and I have my spear hunting, and I'm walking along way away from my tribe, and I stumble upon, I am surprised too, a member of that other tribe who's sitting there maybe eating and has a spear away from them. Now, I'm surprised too, but I have my spear ready, and I've been taught to kill. And there he is, this defenseless person of the other tribe, sitting there knowing he's about to die. And I turn to him, and I get ready to kill him, and as I'm coming down to him, I have to look at him in his face, right there. And I see what Levinas calls the vulnerability of this other. And as I'm doing it, I see this, and what I see in them is not that they are the sense of equal to me, but there's this ultimate difference between me and who I am, or between me and this other. And this shakes me up. I don't know what to do about it. And I go, I can't, because they are different. Because they are different is the reason why I can't do it. And this difference then shakes me up and shows something about me. I'm going, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? What are we here? What is the meaning of our tribe and this relationship we have between these others? It shakes my experience to its core and begins making me ask the questions of the meaning of what's happening here. The other is who does this for me. I think that's a great way to look at it. Now, Levinas is not saying that this happens every single day and always. He says it's not always like this, and it probably rarely is. Most of us tend to totalize others, and most of us would say, screw the face, dead. Okay? But when we can encounter it, okay, and we all have the possibility of it to do it, and what he wants to point out is, though it doesn't always happen, this encounter is the grounding of our existence. This is where it is. It's between me and the other, or the other and I. All right? Now, there are some great examples we can use here to try to show this encounter. And actually, let's go, instead of going to text and things like that, let's talk about movies and films, okay, and TV shows. There's three I have in mind. One of the most famous, and is always brought up with this, is the John Wayne film, The Searchers. Okay, and basically it's the film is based on the idea of the Comanche. Back during the pioneer days, there's a lot of battling between the pioneers and the Comanches and other Indians. But the Comanches used to basically, they would rape and pillage certain farms lands and certain housing and the different pioneers, the certain properties they would have. They would come in and they would kill everybody and take their land back and do these really horrible things. And the pioneers were really fearful of this. But they did also something very strange, is any young child who was usually about 10 or under, they would take in and not kill. And they would raise this person as a Comanche. And so you would find 10, 20 years later, a full-grown white American adult, okay, who is also a Comanche, and culturally a Comanche, and speaks Comanche, acts Comanche, and doesn't really have any remembrance of who they used to be. Now in the movie, what happens is, John Wayne works for this family, okay, he's friends with this family, and him and one of the sons of the family are out hunting one day, and when they come back, the Comanche have come and raped and pillaged their entire home and their farm property, and everyone appears to be dead. All the women and children and men. Now later on in the movie, they search for 15, 20 years to find the Comanche. And to get revenge, what they end up discovering is they find out that the sister of the son, who's still alive, okay, is still alive. And that she has now been raised as a Comanche. And they encounter the Comanche, and there she is. John Wayne, though, is a racist character in it, and he can no longer see her as who she used to be. She is Comanche, and it's almost that he wants to kill her as doing her a favor because Comanches are so horrible, all right? And he hunts them down, and once he kills the entire Comanche tribe together, she is trying to escape, and he chases her down on this horse. He kicks her over, gets off the horse, and gets ready to take his gun, and is pointing it to her face and ready to put her out of her misery. And as he does it, he has to stare into her face, and he begins to shake, and he knows how different they are now, but yet in her face, he begins to shake and begins to change the way he thinks. It begins to shake him up, and he can't do it, and he puts the gun down, and of course, he picks her up and walks off and carries her in the sunset, one of the more famous endings in cinema history. This is what Levinas means. This face of the other in which I encounter them, even though they're different, this difference shakes me to my core, okay, and I must respond, according to Levinas. Another great place, and this is kind of maybe corny, but in the movie, the Disney movie, How to Tame Your Dragon, okay, the main character in the movie takes down with the Night Stalker, okay, accidentally, all right, takes him down and then is going to the woods to kill him because that's what he's taught. And there is the defenseless dragon, okay, all tied up, who is supposed to be mean. And he's coming and has his chance to kill it, okay, and he's sitting right there. And he knows how different dragons are from human beings, okay, and as he's doing it, he just can't do it. And it's not because he sees, eventually he'll see the same, but he sees how different they are and the vulnerability in this and the asking of the other, do not kill. And this boy, he's shaken up from what he is taught and what he thought was going on before and how he'd been picked on for how he couldn't, he was a scientist and things like this, right? And it begins shaking him up and he begins to understand who he really is and what he should do, and they become friends. There is another case of the face. And one other I want to branch in, and this is spoiler alert. If you haven't seen the end of Breaking Bad or watched it, you might want to fast forward about a minute, okay? Breaking Bad is another great place. Vince Gilligan, the creator, actually modeled the ending, he said, off the movie The Searchers. And Walter White, or Heisenberg, at the end is trying to basically get revenge on the people who've stolen his recipe for methamphetamines, okay, the neo-Nazis, and he basically wants to get back at them. And he believes his old partner, Jesse, has been helping them do this, and he's going to kill everybody. All right? And so as he gets there, he begins getting ready to kill everyone, and they bring Jesse to him, who he's ready to kill as well. Yet he discovers that Jesse's been enslaved by these people and has been forced to work and has been beaten over and over again. And as he's standing there, despite all this anger and all this stuff he has for them, he sees that face of Jesse. And he just can't do it, what he had planned, and it changes him. It shakes him up the way he'd been thinking. And as, of course, the ending's happening, I won't say exactly how everyone starts to die, he saves Jesse and covers him up for himself. Or covers Jesse over, and actually Walter White gets hit, all right? So very interesting, and this is what Levinas seems to be talking about. Perhaps we've had encounters like this. Maybe we haven't, okay? Now, the final thing is Levinas saying we ought to be this way. So there's one statement of saying it's descriptive. He's claiming this is the way existence is, as a fact. There is another sense of saying, should we ought to be this way, a normative claim. What is he making of this? And what Levinas seems to be saying is, it is both. Not only is it the origin of existence, but we truly ought to be this way. This is how it is, but this is how we ought to be too. He's saying we should encounter others in this way. We should always respect this difference between us and allow them to open ourselves up like this. And what he claims, and this is where he maybe is now taking this leap, or maybe he's already taken it with the do not kill me, but making a leap and making his claim about existence. He says, in the face of evil, what we must have is this highest level of faith. He says, faith in God is very high, but there's an even higher level of faith we can have. And in the face of evil, we must have faith, he claims, that love without reward is the highest level. That this is the most important thing. We must take the leap and believe that I must love you, the other. Even though I may not get anything in return, I must love you, okay? And that's even the case of my enemy, all right? Even in my enemies, I must have faith that love without reward is what's worth it. And if I can do this, this will maintain, I think he thinks, this incomprehensible relationship between me and the other, which is the ground of our existence. It seems to be the case. And this is, in a nutshell, what Levinas is saying. And if we see this claim here about love without reward, Levinas seems to be one of the very few philosophers who is what we would call an ideal altruist in the 20th century, that is, okay? What I mean is most 20th century altruists are reciprocal altruists. you are helping them because you may get something back, and some which where egoism has come in. Here he seems to be saying it is possible to have faith that you can kind of love the other without having anything in return, almost an unconditional love, in which this will allow this incomprehensible relationship to show itself up, which will give me meaning and so on. This seems to be what he's saying here. And this, in a very short, in a very short version, is what Levinas is explaining from his beginning here with the critique of Heidegger to what he wants to say. Now, for me, I want to make one critique here, or one at least question I have. I am curious of what is the mood that we may be in, or what is that more fundamental experience which allows something like this request for me to see the do not kill me, or for me to be able to have a love of the other, okay? There must be some experience which is happening. What I think is going on here isn't this as well of saying they do not kill me, or saying that love without reward. Aren't we now totalizing and formalizing this incomprehensible relationship I have with it? I'm saying it's like this. Now, this may be a good thing. I'm not disagreeing with maybe we should look like this, but I feel that this is why it's called faith. We're making a choice about this and what it means. What I'm curious about is what is that fundamental mood or experience which I just encounter the other as simply other. In that sense of when I encounter them, they open me up to my possibilities. And what I think happens is as we encounter the other, through speech and through this discourse, what happens is they begin questioning me and I question them in this kind of back and forth. And when this occurs, it shakes me to my core and my being and begin to make me think about who I am and what does life mean and who you are. Because the other is there. Because the other is there, this happens. And as I'm doing this, this opens up my possibilities not only for me but the other as well of what we can and cannot be, and allows me to enrich my life with meaning. I think that is where it is. And of course, one of those meanings I could take on is to do not kill them and to love them without reward. It could also perhaps be to kill them as well or something else. Now, I am not saying we should kill the other or look at it like that. And I understand of the fear of if we leave it that maybe broad with that encounter of the other, could something like an unethical relation occur, something evil happen? Perhaps, but if we truly look at it and understand the other as simply other, as something who can open up my possibilities, by killing them or doing something like this would be closing off my possibilities, would be by taking away this other, but allowing myself to stay with the other and discourse and engage with them. Engaging with them seems to be opening me up because I have to think about what I'm saying. I have to maybe not agree with them, but as they counter back, I have to then rethink this. And as I do this, it seems to open up meaning for myself. And so I don't think it's like Heidegger so much, okay, where it should be a rebellion against the they, but it's or against the others, all right, as these people are taken away, but more by instead of trying to get away from them, I engage with them. I go in face first with them, okay, and try to find my way. And maybe this is the more original relation where something like this can happen. And if we completely shut them off, of course, then we won't get these possibilities by killing or by just objectifying. It is an way of opening up, but I just don't know. I think this may be a way of formalization. But then again, in lived experience, there is always that factical situation, that factical way in which we live our lives, that formalizing way in which we understand this or this. Perhaps this is Levinas' way of trying to put it into words. And my way, as I just said, of me putting into words. And one thing I do want to make clear, though, is I'm not trying to say that this relationship is pure opposition, that is what brings experience. Just like before, as I said earlier, if we get to there, I think that's another way of formalizing, another way of abstracting away from the actual world. The encounter is always with real embodied individuals, and I am a person happening in the here and now, an actual experience. It's never this abstract thing. It is always happening right now, here. And so getting away, as it calling a pure opposition, I worry about. I don't know if that's a good thing. I think perhaps it is something in which we got to stay with this real lived experience, but the other is what makes me first go, what is this? Why is there something rather than nothing? The most primordial question that comes up, as Heidegger calls it, why is there something rather than nothing? That isn't what makes me think everything else. What allows that question to come into being in the first place? What allows the question of something to show up as something which to question seems to be the fact that I encounter these others. The others are what shake me up to ask this question. And if there weren't there, if a man was an island, there perhaps would be no island at all. Okay? There must be the other for that to be the case, for me to wake up. All right, well, this is supposed to be a lecture on Levinas. In the last 5 minutes, I've been talking about what I think. I'll leave it here for today. If you have any questions, please email me. I'm always around, and I will see you next time on my philosophical lecture shorts. Thank you, and have a great day.